What if one tiny trace of DNA on a knife sheath was all it took to unravel one of the most chilling college town murders in recent history? Today we're going to go into the case and the DNA evidence of Bryan Kohlberger. In the case against Bryan Kohlberger, who is accused of the 2022 stabbing deaths of 4 University of Idaho students, DNA evidence plays a pivotal role. Discovery of DNA evidence. Investigators found a tan leather knife sheath at the crime scene, specifically on the bed next to victim Madison Mogen. DNA collected from the button snap of this sheath was identified as a single source of male DNA. DNA analysis and matching. Initially, law enforcement used investigative genetic genealogy (IgG) by uploading the DNA profile from the sheath to public genealogy databases. This process led them to identify a family connection to Kohberger. Subsequently, investigators collected trash from outside Kohlberger's family's home in the Pennsylvania area, which yielded DNA consistent with the sheath sample. To confirm the match, a cheek swab was taken directly from Kohberger. Short tandem repeat STR analysis, a standard method in forensic DNA profiling, was performed. The results indicated a statistical match, with the STR profile being at least 5.37 octillion times more likely to be seen if Kohberger is the source than if an unrelated individual from the general population is the source. Defense's position. Kohlberger's defense team has not disputed that this DNA found on the knife sheath was not his. However, they have questioned the legality and accuracy of the DNA testing processes, including the use of IgG. They have suggested the possibility that the knife sheath could have been planted at the crime scene by the actual perpetrator. Current status. As of now, Kohberger has pleaded not guilty to all charges. The trial is scheduled to begin in August 2025, where the DNA evidence is expected to be a central focus of the proceedings. The investigative genetic genealogy IgG evidence will not be excluded from Bryan Kohlberger's upcoming trial. In February 2025, Idaho Judge Stephen Hippler denied the defense's motion to suppress the IgG evidence, ruling that the law enforcement's use of public genealogy databases did not violate Kohlberger's constitutional rights. The defense had argued that the FBI's use of IgG, comparing DNA from the crime scene to profiles in public genealogy databases, constituted an unlawful search under the Fourth Amendment. They contended that this process, along with subsequent evidence obtained through a trash pull at Kohlberger's family home, should be considered inadmissible. However, the court found that Kohlberger had no reasonable expectation of privacy regarding the DNA left at the crime scene or the genetic data assessed in publicly searchable databases. The judge also noted that the IgG process was conducted in accordance with legal standards, and the evidence obtained was not the result of any constitutional violation. As a result, the IgG evidence, along with other DNA and digital evidence, will be admissible in the trial scheduled to begin August 2025. This evidence is expected to play a central role in the prosecutor's case against Kohlberger. A jury will ultimately say in Bryan Kohlberger's trial if they believe the prosecution. DNA on the knife sheath will be a major factor. Jurors may find the match from Kohlberger's cheek swab to the crime scene compelling. Phone and surveillance evidence showing Kohlberger near the victim's home before and after the murders could strengthen the case. Behavioral evidence like internet searches, vehicle movements, and social media activity may also sway them toward guilt. If they side with the defense, it could be the lack of eyewitnesses, a murder weapon, or direct motive could raise doubt. The defense may argue contamination or planting of evidence, especially the knife sheath. Concerns on how IgG was used might linger in some jurors' mind, even though it's been ruled admissible. Many jurors also get IgG, and they don't want their IgG used in the future. They may feel that it is an infringement upon privacy. Juror considerations. They'll weigh scientific evidence versus circumstantial evidence. They'll watch Kohlberger's demeanor in court and possibly be influenced by how he's portrayed, calculated versus misunderstood. If any juror has doubt, it could lead to a hung jury or acquittal. Let's go into a mock summary of what the jury foreperson might say at the end of the Bryan Kohlberger trial if he were found guilty. After carefully reviewing all the evidence presented, particularly the DNA match on the knife sheath, the defendant's phone and vehicle data placing him near the crime scene, and the behavioral patterns both before and after the murders, we, the jury, found that the prosecution met its burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. The evidence painted a clear and consistent picture, and we unanimously find the defendant guilty on all counts. Now let's look at a version if the jury were not convinced. While the DNA evidence raised serious questions, the absence of a clear motive, eyewitness identification, and direct link to the murder weapon left too much room for reasonable doubt. Therefore, we were unable to reach a unanimous decision of guilt, and the defendant is found not guilty. Now, what if it's a hung jury? Here's a mock summary of what the jury person might say in the case of a hung jury. Your Honor, after several days of deliberation, we were unable to reach a unanimous verdict. While some jurors felt the DNA and circumstantial evidence clearly pointed to the defendant's guilt, others believed the case lacked enough direct proof to convict beyond a reasonable doubt. Despite our best efforts, we remain divided and cannot come to an agreement. Bryan Kohlberger can theoretically be convicted on DNA evidence alone, but in practice, prosecutors usually rely on multiple types of evidence to build a strong case. Here's a breakdown of what's known publicly about the other evidence against him. The male DNA found on the button snap of a knife sheath left on the bed next to a victim matches Kohberger through short tandem repeat STR analysis. The probability of a match is astronomically high, 5.37 octillion times more likely to be him than a random person. Cell phone data. Kohlberger's phone was turned off during the time of the murders, but cell data shows he was near the victim's house on at least 12 occasions prior to the crime. He left his residence at 2:42 a.m., the night of the murders and reconnected to the cell towers near his home around 5 a.m. It also pinged south of the crime scene minutes after the murders were believed to have occurred. Surveillance footage. A white Hyundai Elantra, the same model Kohlberger drove, was captured on video driving past the crime scene multiple times before and shortly after the murders. The car was also seen speeding away from the area around 4:20 a.m. when the killings were believed to have happened. Behavioral and circumstantial evidence. He allegedly changed license plates on his car shortly after the murder. Law enforcement said he cleaned his car thoroughly, including the trunk, using gloves. His academic background in criminology has raised speculation about whether he was trying to commit a perfect crime. Reports suggest he followed one or more of the victims on social media. Eyewitness testimony. One surviving roommate reportedly saw a masked man with bushy eyebrows leaving the crime scene. Kohberger has bushy eyebrows, according to investigators. The eyewitness didn't see his face clearly, so it's not a strong ID, but it's being used to support the timeline, especially seeing that Kohlberg took a photo of himself and put it on social media and captioned it as bushy eyebrows after the murder. While DNA is the strongest forensic link, the prosecution will also rely on a mountain of circumstantial evidence, vehicle, phone, behavior, to build a narrative of guilt. Juries are more likely to convict when multiple forms of evidence paint a cohesive picture. From the quiet streets of Moscow, Idaho, to the center of a national spotlight, the Bryan Kohlberger case has gripped the public with its blend of science, suspicion, and unanswered questions. DNA led the charge, technology filled the gaps, but as the courtroom battles will continue in August and public opinion sways, one truth remains. Justice is a journey, one that doesn't always end with a verdict. Whether guilty, not guilty, or hung in doubt, this case will echo for years to come, and we'll be here following every step of the story. Blessings and condolences go out to the families affected by this crime, and may the victims continue to rest in peace. Thank you for listening to the Fairfax Files. Please go ahead and subscribe and make sure you join me next week for the next case. Thank you so much for being here. Your presence is appreciated. Please be safe out there.